Hi, this is Tom, and I would like to talk for a few moments about Michelle's July 24th blog post. When I read it, it certainly got my attention, and I had a distinct reaction to it. You'll see why in a moment. I think it's interesting to note that, for the most part, she wrote about achieving or recovering self-esteem after a sexual assault. I want to talk about reestablishing your sense of safety. Now, my interest in this subject is fairly large, and there's a couple reasons for this. One of them is pretty specific, and it has to do with the fact that many of my clients are female and they've experienced physical or sexual assault. I have another reason as well, and it'll be clear shortly. When we talk about self-efficacy, a word I like, although it's a little tricky to say, to me that's a belief and it's also a fact. How you think about yourself and how you actually are have a rather intimate relationship. When you've had a self-efficacy failure, you've let yourself down in some sense. You're going to experience a loss of self-respect. If you thought you could fly and you find out you don't really have wings, for example, you're going to think a little less of yourself. It's pretty much guaranteed. If you thought you could keep yourself safe, or you thought you'd never be assaulted and it proved to be wrong, your sense of self is going to be shrink a little bit necessarily, quite possibly a lot. You're going to have a loss of sense of competence, of course, and competency is pretty important, especially to grown-ups. And very often when the issue is some kind of an assault, you're going to experience a loss of personal safety. Now, recovery is about getting back both your belief in yourself and getting back a certain reality that backs up that belief. And if you've never had enough either of belief in yourself or of the reality of being able to keep yourself safe, then it's about getting those qualities into your life. And the same considerations are involved in both cases. So I want to say at the outset, this is mostly for the gals. Some guys may find some of what I have to say useful, and that's great, but I'm thinking about gals for the most part right now. Let me begin by being developmental in my perspective. I'd like you to think back about not only what you experienced, but what you've noticed about people growing to young adulthood. My observation is that most females are fairly concerned with acquiring the ability to be attractive, to attract a male. It's understandable. Most young males are also interested in attracting a mate, but they go about it rather more indirectly. They go about it by acquiring potency in the world, power, because whether they're aware of it or not, females are attracted to that quality in a male. Now here's what's not happening if you're female, and this is the beginning of the problem. You're not learning to handle yourself physically in combat. You're not learning the psychology of conflict. You're not learning how to assess conflict situations so that you can survive or even win. Staying safe means that you maintain your boundaries. There are many aspects to this. Some are verbal, some are mental, some are physical. As a gal, since you haven't spent a whole lot of time concerned about boundary assertion and boundary maintenance, maybe it's time to start thinking seriously about the problem. Maybe it's time to talk with someone who has thought seriously about the problem. I'm going to suggest to you that that person you might want to talk to will almost certainly be a male, because for all of our growing up time, we spend a lot of time thinking about these issues. So now you know my second reason for being interested in this general subject. I'm male. It's impossible for me not to be interested. When disaster strikes or a fight breaks out, I run toward the problem, not away from it. It's just my nature. So, some pointed advice from a male who spent most of his life around other males who are larger and stronger than he is. Defending a boundary is about saying no forcefully enough so that you make it stick. This skill requires practice. You don't learn this skill working on your makeup and wardrobe. You must think about it. You must practice it. It's about investing time. There's no other way. This is why males are better at it in general than females are. We simply put more time in on it. Here's the single most important thing that I want you to know about handling any conflict situation well. You win if you don't lose. And I know a sure and certain way not to lose a fight. Can you guess what it is? Don't get into one. Now, that's not going to happen by accident. It's like avoiding not getting killed in a car wreck. Same idea. If you're going to avoid a potentially injurious or lethal conflict, you're going to have to assess your risk. And you're going to have to anticipate problems. And then if at all possible, work to avoid the problem. Now, sometimes that's not acceptable. And sometimes you can't. But you begin with a risk assessment. Here's some things you should think about. How safe are the people you're with? How well do you know them? Think about the people you spend time with. Think about the people you're going to this party with. Can you run? Are you dressed so you can run? Can you run in the shoes that you go out in at night? How about the dress that you're going to wear? Can you sprint in that? If you don't anticipate these things, it's really easy to put yourself in a situation where of course you feel unsafe because you've made yourself unsafe. Where are you going to run? On any given street, where are the safe places? The safe people. And I should say the dangerous one as well. When I walk outdoors anywhere in a city, I know where everybody is, and I've scoped them out as to their safety or dangerousness. I learned to do this as a young man on the streets of Chicago. It's an invaluable lesson. If you see the problem coming, you at least have a moment or two to prepare yourself, or you can avoid it, hopefully. Alertness, how aware are you? How aware are you after 2 beers? How about when you're down in your sleep? You may not be thinking about these things, but someone else may well be. Would you like to meet them? If you don't think about these things, you're making yourself more vulnerable, obviously. As I said before, identify risks, anticipate problems, and work to avoid them. That is the single best idea. There's no amount of firepower you can bring to a problem that beats not having the problem in the first place.